Once students have come up with the Pythagorean theorem and it's been explained, it's time to review before we move on to applying the theorem practically. So review what it means, what kind of triangle this is. It's a right triangle because of that right angle. The hypotenuse is across from it. The two legs, leg, hypotenuse. Review that, make sure students understand, and then you can ask the questions. So how many right angles does a right triangle have? 1. If any students respond with more than one, then ask them how to make a triangle with more than one right angle. Ask them what happens when you use more than one right angle. Most students will respond with, you've made a square or a rectangle. What name is given to the two sides of the triangle that form the right angle? The leg. It is important for students to remember that, because otherwise when they see a missing side, they might name it the wrong letter. What symbol is used to identify a right angle? Small square. The visuals should be able to help the students remember. How many degrees are in a right angle? 90 degrees. All of this information is on the sheet. What name is given to the longest side of a right triangle? The hypotenuse. What is the name of the side opposite of the right angle? Sometimes students don't understand because it's the same answer as number 5, so they think it's a different answer. So make sure that they understand that it's still the hypotenuse. Is it possible for a right triangle to have two right angles? We've already touched on it a little bit, but make sure that students are able to verbalize that in their own words. So ask them to write a sentence explaining why or why not they think that a right triangle can have two right angles. Once we're done with that, we're ready to move on. So students write out the vocabulary so that they remember it. They can put it in their own words. For students, ELL students or special needs students, you might have to give them the vocabulary words. And then they can work out the problems. And these examples walk them through. So you can tell them using think alouds to help them to see how you're thinking and how you're solving. The most important thing I tell my students to do is always to label the triangle first, because that will help them to substitute the numbers in when they go to solve them. So we know the longest side is C, so we always label it C. And then it doesn't really matter which way we label the other two sides. I like to keep the shorter side as A, just to keep it in order. So what is the theorem that we use? The Pythagorean theorem. And that says a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Now it's time to substitute our numerical values for a, b, and c. So we said side A is 12, so we would put 12 there. Side B is 16, we would put 16 there. We don't know what side C is, so we leave that as c squared. So we have 12 squared plus 16 squared equals c squared. Now it's time to evaluate the powers. So we have 12 squared is 144. 16 squared is 256. Equals c squared. We keep that because we still don't have that. Okay, then we add the two together and we have 400 is equal to c squared after we added them. And then we take the square root of each side. It's easy for students to see if we keep doing just as we did in the beginning when we were solving for the variables, to keep doing the same thing on both sides. So we're taking the square root on this side. We also need to take the square root on this side. The square root of 400 is 20. The square root of c squared is c, something we have learned in the previous lesson. So that means that the length of hypotenuse C is 20 centimeters. Okay, if they need it, go over the next example with them. If students are feeling a little bit more comfortable, maybe you ask them the questions and they give you the answers. So once again, we label side A. Oh, B is already labeled for us, and then we have side C. We substitute those in. First we write the theorem, then we substitute our values. 5 squared plus b squared equals 13 squared. Evaluate the powers. 5 squared is 25 plus b squared equals 13 squared, which is 169. Now, I remind them what we did when we would solve for variables. We wanted to isolate the variable. So that means that we have to get rid of everything that is close to it. So what is around it? We have this 25. How do we get rid of 25? We have to subtract 25. And if we subtract 25 from one side, we have to subtract 25 from the other side. So 25 minus 25 gives us 0, and b squared is all alone equals 144. Now b squared is still not our answer because we still need to deal with that square. So what do we have to do to get to isolate b? We have to find the square root of b squared and the square root of 144. So b is equal to 12.